Hey readers, Echo here. Happy New Year. Because I'm falling a bit behind, as per usual, I'm going to release my top 10 reads as a two-parter because I'm criminally slow at fixing up these videos. But as it is every year, it's super fun to watch all of you guys' top videos, and I want to be a part of the conversation, so let's just get to it. Here are my top 10 reads of 2022. So starting off, number 10 for me was a book I wanted to make a standalone video on, but I didn't end up doing that. So it's a book I haven't even talked about. It is Rakes of the Old Court by Matteo Caragiale. This book came out in 1929, and it finally found an English translation middle of 2021 by Northwestern University Press, and that's how I came across it too. I was just browsing their webpage on the Northwestern World Classics listing. The book caught my eye because Sean Cotter was credited as the translator of this work, and I figured it would be interesting to talk a little bit about this before the release of Solenoid. And Sean Cotter's introduction to the book is worth the price of admission alone. Mathieu's writes with a very opulent literary style and uses very odd and strange words. And Sean describes the process of translation very interestingly in the introduction. The book itself is described as a jewel of Romanian modernism. It is a decadent symbolist text. It really encapsulates the spirit of 1920s Bucharest. It's a book of decadence and wandering the streets of the city. There's bars and brothels and gambling. There are stories of love and decay. And that sort of texture and mood that it brings in this sort of spectacular language really makes this a wonderful read. Somewhat sunken beneath the arch of his eyebrows are rare blue. Their line of sight, unspeakably sweet and veiled in nostalgia, seemed to follow the recollection of a dream. I'll link to an excellent review of this in the LA Review of Books, and to cite it, like any excellent poet, he pursues the art and science of the rare word. He wants that word to shine in his sentence, so he mounts the brilliant gem in a crown of syntax, the best analogue for which is perhaps the lapidary prose of Oscar Wilde. Even after 9 decades, the style of Caragiale's sole novel amazes us. His use of concise and effective images borrowed from the most vivid and colorful slang, his usual syntax filled with double meanings and subtle innuendos, his characters who tell the truth and lie at the same time. There's nothing like it in Romanian letters, and I'm not sure whether there really is anything like it anywhere else. At number 9, we have a repeat author from the best books of 2021. It's Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Now, this is a bleak and very often hard to read book. The violence within is significant, and I wasn't as impressed by the violence and the bleakness. This isn't where I learned about the incredible violence that we're capable of as a species, and the history of the horrible transgressions done against native peoples across the world. But I can imagine for some people who this is new, that it could make a very large impression. But I still think that this is an excellent book. I think that Suttree is, in my mind, a much better book. It has more of a core of humanity in it as I read it, and I'm likely wrong or not particularly married to my opinion, or not going to claim it's the right one, but I think that Suttree manages to balance beautiful writing with a heart-wrenching but good story in a better way. Some of the highs in this text, though, are very beautiful. There are some descriptions of the nature and the cold night sky, and other descriptions that are just poetic perfection. I have heard a lot of people say that this is a book that impressed them much more on a rereading than a first reading. I can't speak to that, but hopefully I will get around to rereading it one day and allowing it to enter into that sort of favorite of all time tier, which for now it will not. Looking forward to reading The Passenger now, and Stella Maris in 2023. And we'll see if Cormac McCarthy can stay in the top 10 3 years in a running. Coming up at number 8, it's the Annotations by John Keane. This was completely unknown to me, but I met someone on the internet who said this was an absolute must-read, and they were completely correct about that. The book is incredibly dense. The novel is 75 pages long, but there is so much to unpack in it. So much of John Keane's life, and so many ideas compressed with this beautiful language. And there is great difficulty in reading this as well. You get this description of life growing up in St. Louis, described in very poetic and beautiful, sometimes high modernist prose, which I think is very effective, because it got me to read the book, and then I had to reread it to really try to digest what I was reading. And it's so beautifully written that I know that this is probably a book that I will reread many times, because it is so short, and it gives so much in that limited space it entails, which is good to me, because it means that I will think about these issues. I'll think about race and social class and a sexuality that isn't my own, and it's nice to get these experiences that are very different from mine, but with that same aesthetic core of Joyce and Faulkner and Morrison and jazz. There's so many references to jazz in this. But yeah, no, it's a fantastic book. I hope that anyone and everyone will read it. And it's short, so technically you can read it quickly, but I think that it'll take a while for you to deplete this beautiful book by John Keane. Coming in at number 7 is Philippe Jacotet, Obscurity. Philippe Jacotet was born in Switzerland, but I think he lived most of his life in France. And this is a short novella that he wrote as he was sort of experiencing a poetic dry spell. Is written and published a lot of poetry, not so much fiction like this. And this very pretty book was put out by Seagull Press, which puts out a lot of really pretty hardbacks. I have several Pascal Quignard books by them, and I have the first Seed Time book, which has more fragmentary sketches and pieces of poetry or descriptions of dreams, and it's all in all very cozy. He kept journaling through his life, and they've collected these in 3 seed books plus one final journal collection called Patches of Sunlight or of Shadow. And a friend of mine has read that and said that was fantastic as well. So, but both are put out on Seagull Books, and they have a very nice catalog of European literature in particular, but also Arab and African literature. They put out really beautiful editions, and I would very much recommend you check them out. Lots of wonderful books by Jocotet, lots of wonderful Pascal Quignards. But going back to Obscurity, this is a book about the narrator describes his master, this charismatic, intellectual and poetic force of a man that apparently was the life of every party, and this whole thing reminded me at first very much of Macedonio Fernandez and Borges. What we see at the beginning of this book is that the narrator has gone on a trip. He needed to live separately from his master for a while, but he has come back and he wants to reconnect with him, and you start to see that his master has gotten old. He's no longer the party goer, the forceful person who imposes a presence on things. He doesn't dominate conversation. He's a shadow of himself, and the narrator speculates if this is, just because of how much less life is left to him. And the book is beautifully written. So the book tackles decay and aging, and even scarier than death, getting old and losing yourself. But it's a beautiful and wonderful book, and I'll end it with a quote. I remembered having once walked these streets at the break of dawn, a ghost surprised by even the muddiest light, at the side of a woman who was like a stream of milk in the night, something soft and dangerously obscene, whose every dream, every gesture was boldness itself. In the number 6 spot, we have a book that I don't own a copy of. So, in placeholder of that, here's my trusty Onyx books. And the book is In Youth is Pleasure by Denton Welch. Denton Welch was a Chinese-born British writer and painter. who lived between 1915 and 1948. In Youth is Pleasure came out in 1944, and it is a fantastic book, and the style which this was written in is simply fantastic. I think Denton Welch has catapulted himself to very near the top of my list of favorite writers. He writes with a very inward focus, and he's got an extreme eye for detail. And in Youth is Pleasure takes place during a summer vacation at an English country hotel. A young boy named Orville Pym is the protagonist, and there's an afterword that shows us how closely Orville Pym was modeled after Denton Welch himself. And the book deals with a privileged teenager who still feels alienated by friends and family. He feels an attraction to the rugged life of some much less privileged people he observes. He obsesses over collecting certain items. He watches hotel guests and has sort of struggling with queer sexual awakening. And everything that happens is interesting enough by itself, but what really makes this soar is just fantastic writing. I'm going to buy everything I can find by Denton Welch. There are some posthumous novels, and his journals have been published, and yeah, I look forward to rereading this and reading more of by Denton Welch. If you watched to the end, thank you so much, and I hope you'll come back for my top 5 reads of 2022. And if not, no worries. Please write a comment, though, with some of your favorite reads from the last year. Once again, thank you so much.